So my parents really had to work really hard, but everything that we had, went into our education. So I always had the tutors in math and physics, in English, and we didn't have a food on the table, but I always had a teacher. I would have a secondhand clothes, but I definitely would have a teacher. Our mission is to improve people's lives, right? So, counter explanation of it was we are in the business of making our consumers' lives easier and not our own life. So let's forget about the challenges. We'll solve them. We have an incredible team. We're going to get it done. So, I mean, there's so many services in just the one single application that, there are pretty much no companies that would be comparable to Kaspi. If you plan that you will be launching the new services, it's important that your current consumer base loves your products. Because if your current consumers don't love your products, then anything new will launch, this is going to be a disaster, right? They're not going to be adopting you.
Everything you do, tells me you live a very purpose-driven life.
Yeah, and I think that's definition of happiness in some way.
Mikhail, or should I say Misha, welcome to New York City.
Thanks.
So we have a lot to cover. We're going to talk about Kaspi, obviously. We're going to talk about the amazing things that are happening in Kazakhstan. We're going to hear about your background. But before we talk about all those things, we are in NASDAQ right now, the center of capitalism. Maybe you can tell us why decide to list in NASDAQ in New York City versus any other stock exchanges around the world?
Well, we did the IPO of Kaspi KZ in January of this year. At that time, actually, in 2020, we did an IPO on London Stock Exchange. So I think, we're probably the only company which now you could compare for a certain period of time, difference between London Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. And, from today's perspective, that was a successful decision which had, two primarily goals for us. Number one, increase liquidity because the market is large, much deeper the U.S. market, and from today's perspective, our volumes of trade are 20 times more than what we did on London Stock Exchange. So that's number one, and we set the goal, we did an IPO, and we pretty much achieved it. And then the second goal is, as a result of the liquidity, also have access to the wider pool of investors. And IPO that we did in January was successful. It was the largest IPO in the US from I think October of 2023. And and we have investors that are also investing in Meli and other tech companies. And it's just the access to the investor base, which is familiar with the business model, I think was really the very important criteria for us. And if you see how the stock performed, we did an IPO at around $92 per share, and now our price is around 120, plus minus depending how market trades for a year. So has been a good performance since January.
Pretty good decision. So for entrepreneurs out there listening who are considering listing from outside the US, we're talking about entrepreneurs in Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, you would recommend coming to New York?
It depends on the profile of the business. So, there are many things that might not be applicable to other businesses, but if you are a tech company, and if you are in the categories, in the businesses like we are, in the payments and e-commerce and fintech, then the U.S. market is definitely the place to do your placement. And you as a company also should be ready, because the U.S. and the requirements for the company to do an IPO is quite high. But if you successfully go through the process like Kaspi did, this also quality stamp on your business. So I think, yes, I would recommend if you're a tech company, U.S. is the place to do the IPO.
So now you're obviously, these are the big leagues at the global stage, but let's step back a little bit and let's hear a bit about your background. You are originally not from Kazakhstan, you're from Georgia, right? Maybe tell us, where you grew up in Georgia and did you always know that you were going to be entering business, or did you consider any other careers?
Yeah, well, I was born in Georgia. My parents, my sister, and her family, they still live in Georgia. So, yeah, I mean, people that have sort of started probably my journey in life, they remain the most important people in my life, my parents. I think one of the things which I was different from our family maybe is that, we were not with, we didn't really had a lot of money basically. So my parents really had to work really hard, but, everything that we had, went into our education. So I always had the tutors in math and physics, in English, and we didn't have a food on the table, but I always had a teacher. I would have a secondhand clothes, but I definitely would have a teacher. So that's, I think, was probably the most important thing in the life, because from there my desire to learn has been coming from my parents, and the responsibility for it, getting the grades right and measured by the grades, your efforts of learning and studying, I think that comes from my family. Yeah, so yeah, Georgia, parents still there. I love the country, but I'm in Kazakhstan already for a long time, since 2006. So, large part of my professional career, I'm in Kazakhstan building Kaspi together with our partners and our team.
And you ventured into the business world while you were still a student. Is that right?
Yeah, when I was a student, I mean, obviously you have, I mean, it was important for me just because, I think making the living was important. And I started when I was in the third year or fourth year. Basically, I started to work for a consulting company and then created my own consulting company, where I became a partner. And that consulting company was basically working with the Big Four, helping them to do an audits and, tax planning and things like that. Some of my teachers and professors from my university were working with me, and some of my friends from the university also have been working in this company. So I was a student and basically still running the consulting firm. I went to HBS in 2000, and my consulting firm became Ernst & Young.
So you sold it to Ernst & Young?
Yeah, it was Andersen initially, and then it became Ernst & Young because Ernst & Young took over the Andersen franchise in that part of the world. Yeah, and one of the board directors that we have at Kaspi, for example, is former head of Ernst & Young for the whole region, and before that he was head of Andersen for the region, and before that he was actually a manager that came to Georgia and with whom we set up the first contract for Andersen franchise in Georgia. So, that has been a very interesting experience for me. But being a student and building and developing the prominent consulting auditing firm was really very rewarding experience for me personally, from learning perspective, I mean. Now,
going from Georgia to HBS for your MBA, that is not a common path. I got an MBA myself, and those classes, there's huge international segments of international students, right? You have a lot of people from India, a lot of people from China, Brazil. And then the smaller countries, sometimes there's no representation. I'm sure that was the case for Georgia. How did you find your way to HBS?
Well, I mean, in general, I think, and that's also reflected in our company and our team, when we get some goal in our head, we always get there and we execute. And, and the same happened with my HBS desire, actually. When I was at the university, we had the classes from one of the first Georgians that that entered HBS and graduated from HBS. And Givi Zaldastanishvili was his name. And I got inspired by HBS, and I basically said, HBS, Harvard Business School, is the place where I want to learn and being educated. And that was before I started my business, but that goal was there. So, when the time was right and my age was right, and I just basically just applied for HBS. So nothing could really stop me from my own desire. And a lot of friends of mine and my people that have been working with me basically were suggesting that I should stay, a successful company and what else you can learn. But I had the goal that I have to be in best business school, I have to be taught by the case studies. I want to be in an environment when for 2 years, I will be just thinking about learning only and, also getting to know some of the smartest people from all over the world. So I had this goal and I basically just executed it. And Givi Zaldastanishvili was inspiration for me. And I just applied and got accepted pretty much.
How did that?
I wasn't accepted the first time, actually.
Oh, no. You tried twice.
I tried twice.
Okay.
I was not accepted the first time. And then I was, I didn't take no for an answer. So I basically traveled to Harvard. And it was very unusual because usually your admissions people wouldn't really meet with you. But the head of admissions at that time was leaving. And he basically didn't have any downside for meeting me. And he was going to work for an investment fund, basically. And then I just met him and we had like 15-minute conversation. And after that, I remember his words. He said that, I realized that Harvard Business School admissions process is not perfect. And this was the time I knew that next year I will apply and I will get accepted. So I applied next year and I got accepted.
They realized they made a mistake.
Yeah, that was encouraging. But again, this comes from the fact it's a goal setting, If you have a goal in your head and you focus on it and you execute it, get things done, I think that's really what counts in life.
And while you were there, how did that change you? What did you take out of the Harvard Business School experience?
Well, friends, obviously, 2 years in a tough environment, especially the first year, which is the toughest. It's almost like somebody opens the tap on your face and all these cases and, you sleep like 2-3 hours. So it's really challenging environment, especially if English is not your native language and you've been raised in different environments. So, I have great friends all over the world, really excited to hear their successes. And I think that was the most important. For the first year, I also had the goal that, I want to make sure that I can succeed in that tough environment. So I did put a lot of work and I received the first year honors, which is like top of the class, basically. And then the second year, I said, I'm here not just for honors, I'm here for friends, and develop relationships alongside with the knowledge. And the second year, basically, I had a balance between studying, but also, obviously having fun with the friends. And yeah, that was really probably some of the best 2 years of my life. And I enjoyed building relationships, but also enjoyed learning, which, I constantly do for myself and in our team.
So after HBS and before Kaspi, you actually became a private equity investor.
Right.
How does it feel to go from an entrepreneur, a consultant, to actually investing?
Well, I didn't want to do advisory services like consulting or investment banking because, I really like to be responsible for the result. So and I really believe into being focused on something, really sort of and getting this done rather than run from one assignment to another. So private equity or venture capital was the closest I could get to actually owning the company. So I was not interested in investment as per se, but I was interested in owning the company, right? And influencing and helping it with the strategy or product development or anything like that. So that's why private equity was in an interesting area for me. But when I was graduating, basically, I wasn't sure, where I would be. And there was not sure. In the second year, there was this one company which was largest private equity in the CIS, and I basically just got in touch with them. And Mike Calvi, who is a managing partner of the fund, basically were discussing, and they had no jobs, and I said I will work for free, I'm interested in the business. I can definitely, bring the value. So just get me there. And almost at the day of my graduation, he just called me and he said, come over, we have a place for you. And I basically went straight without vacation after graduation to work for the private equity fund.
Yeah, you were living the dream.
Well, I mean, yeah, you take the risk.
Yes, yeah.
Not many students would say, now, just take me on a job, I will work for free.
And tell us how you first got in touch with the Kaspi team at that point called Kaspersky Bank.
Well, I mean, it was a private equity, it was investment of our fund. So when, while working in Baring Vostok, I did several investments in the tech and financial services, and I made the partner, I think, within a year. Something like that. I don't track my professional career, but it was roughly around a year. And then I was just doing investments by myself, and one of the investments was in at that time, one of the just average universal banks, basically. And and we invested, and it was the largest investment that we did. Then the crisis came in 2008. Equity was negative, but that was an important investment, so I decided to step in. And at that time, I clearly always want to be an operator, just really own and run the business. So that was the interesting opportunity for me. Our partner, Vyacheslav Kiev, and our friend, he was really excited about me sort of taking over, and Baring Vostok, obviously was interested just because it was a large investment and it really required fixing, and because the equity was negative. So this is how my story started, and everything you see now at Kaspi, basically didn't exist then. So everything has been built from the scratch, and it started building for management team, but then obviously we all together build all these incredible products and the super app strategy.
So help us understand Kazakhstan at that point. You said 2008. It was very much an oil-driven economy, oil industry, energy. But of course, you saw that this is an opportunity to build something different in Kazakhstan. Why was that a special moment?
Well, I mean, it was a moment of basically just stepping up and taking responsibility on yourself. And the opportunity was there in terms of becoming the CEO and the shareholder in the business. And I was just, I knew that what things needs to be done. And obviously it had, usually the change management really starts from actually changing the management. So pretty much fired everyone and just built the management from scratch. And as we started to work together, there is a lot of inspirations and ideas come. It's great to be surrounded by the people that are smarter than you. So I think if you get the management right and the team you're working with, and I think that just working together is really rewarding, and that rewarding experience final result is just this incredibly unique company which went from financial services to to payments, e-commerce, travel, grocery, government services, bill payments. We have, I mean, this company, the services we have done is incredible. You have digital documents in our super app. You can register a car in our app. You can issue driving license. You can get married. You can have a birth certificate for your kids. You can pay taxes. You can register your business. You can buy your food with a free delivery. You can buy your electronics or clothing with a delivery and pick up in the lockers like Amazon locker style. And you can buy airline tickets, railway tickets, vacation packages, packaged vacations in the hotels around the world. You can have your savings account. You can do P2P transfer to your friends and family like Venmo or Cash App. You can have a car loan. You can actually buy a car. You can buy spare parts and the tires. So I mean, there's so many services in just the one single application that there are pretty much no companies that would be comparable to Kaspi when everything, all those services are in a single mobile app.
Yeah.
And that's why we call it super app, because it's all diverse services in a single mobile application.
But to get to the super app, something I'm very interested in, you had to come in, take the reins of what was then a bank.
Correct.
You replace management And then something that you definitely did is you started to change the internal culture. Because even if it was the best bank in the world, it's still a bank, right? But now you've built a tech company. So take us through that process early on, how you very consciously and deliberately changed the culture.
Well, I mean, first of all, that was, somewhere around 2010, maybe 2011, when we were sort of, everybody was talking about the tech companies overtaking financial services. Everybody was speculating, can you imagine if Google does it? Can you imagine Amazon going into financial services and things like that? And the tech companies, everybody loves tech companies, everybody hates banks. So as a result, tech companies would disrupt. And we basically, I'm not the banker, right? And our team, actually, none of us are bankers. So we were, I was sitting there and saying, if tech companies can do financial services, who said that, financial services cannot do tech? And that was when we sort of decided that, let's just start sort of rolling out all those, the basically online services and technology for our consumers. So that was the strategy. We basically want to be an e-commerce, we want to be a payments company, and we want to be big in the mobile payments, especially. And so those things were formulating the strategy. But we also knew that we will be sort of innovating on a regular basis, because going from financial services, which is foundation of our fintech platform now, and then going where we wanted, we basically had to innovate like every quarter, almost every 6 months, launching big business. And for any innovative company, if you plan that you will be launching the new services, it's important that your current consumer base loves your products. Because if your current consumers don't love your products, then anything new will launch, this is going to be a disaster, right? They're not going to be adopting you. It's almost like in life, right? If you respect me as an individual and I will reference somebody to you, you would expect that somebody I reference is worth it, right? So it's the same in life. If there are 3 people sitting at the table and they hate your products, and they're also suddenly you're launching another product, that's just, these guys are going to basically not use this product. They're not going to reference to each other. And actually they are going to spread negativity rather than, so we focused on the quality of the products. That was probably the most important. Alongside the super app strategy, focusing on the products, quality was extremely important. And we basically reorganized our corporate culture. We killed all the financial incentives and the sales incentives on the product development side. So in our company, pretty much very few people have sales targets or financial targets, but we have targets, and now it's not the target, it's the DNA, that the quality of the product has to be exceptional. So we defined our mission that we want to improve people's lives. Once we defined this mission, we always like to measure things, and we had to come up with the metrics which would measure what does it mean improving people's lives. And improving people's lives metric, we decided to use Net Promoter Score, just because we like the concept of, you would be asked whether you would recommend to your family and friends, and we thought that's a powerful question. And we basically launched the Net Promoter Score across our company for every product. I mean, if you take today's perspective, we are measuring the quality of every individual service and product by surveying roughly about 300,000 people every month.
Every month.
So we have wide range of the product, and every product has a Net Promoter Score or the quality score. You have immediately feedback, ranked like top 5 or top 10 positive, things to improve. And every individual team that is responsible for the product development can actually, listen to those calls, read the reports and come up with an ideas how the things can be improved so that Net Promoter Score and quality is increasing. And that has been now the biggest priority, across the company. The third thing we have done, apart from, defining sort of super app and the quality of the product, is the way we're organized. So we have, it's almost like if you are in a small restaurant and the chain, right? And the small restaurant owner would come to you, he would say, how are you, greet you, things like that. Like you have this personal attention. So we call it sort of, there is a directly responsible individual. And then if you are in a chain, you are part of the process, right? So they serve you as a part of the process. So we decided that we wanted to create this feeling of a startup when we would have a smaller sort of, first of all, every product would have a directly responsible individual. So every product you see in our app always has an individual that's responsible for it. And then we'll put together the directly responsible teams, which means, developers, data guys, design, UX. If you need the legal, that will be, person would be part of the team. So those are the small teams, usually sort of maybe 15, 20 people, not more than that. And this individual and those teams are, responsible 100% from anything that happens around the product. So they develop it, they listen to consumers, they plan releases, they launch releases, they monitor engagement from consumers, and again collect the feedback, and this cycle after the feedback you come up with the ideas to develop. So though this thing also was extremely important for us, and when there is a responsibility, there is also accountability and feeling of being owner of this product. So that was really important change in the company as well.
Yeah, you take it very seriously, and there have been customer service calls where the customer would maybe give you some feedback, maybe complain, and that would result in a new feature that you would launch, because you actually do listen to your customers.
Yeah, I think we do the customer. We do sort of customer survey and the research. It's not the research, it's really actual feedback on the product usage, which is a bit different. We do it differently than others. So for example, when I'm mentioning like 300,000 consumers, we will actually talk to people. So it's not like email, when you just get an email and only 1% of the, people open it, and you just get you don't know what another 99% of people think about your products. No, we actually are personally approaching the consumers. We're calling, we're recording those calls, and then the product teams, are sitting through the feedback, through the calls, and then they are prioritizing it for some of the features for the improvement. And they're planning these regular product releases, we call them. Usually product releases from 3 to 6 months, depending how complex the feature is. And this is really sort of the constant improvement, never-ending feedback. This is the beauty about building the business, which is customer-oriented. You can do whatever KPIs eventually, but if you get to the stage when you're listening to the consumer, you can prioritize the feedback, and you can prioritize the tasks and measure them by the customer quality. This is the key. And we are very successful financially, but no one has a financial targets. So that's also another important characteristics of our corporate culture.
Now, when you talk about key decisions for the company, very consequential decisions, launching the super app is something that you mentioned. When you were internally planning this, there's a lot of resistance, and you actually got advice from so-called experts to go a different direction, not a super app.
Right. I mean, you should give a credit to everyone at that time. Because when we were thinking about the super app, the single purpose mobile applications were in fashion. So that's number one. Number two, nobody in the world has really done anything similar. So that was kind of groundbreaking, the strategy itself. The marketing sort of specialists or consultants, they can hardly imagine that somebody would place the savings account and buy kitchen accessories in a one mobile application, right? So everybody would say you need to have a different brand, you need to have different this, different that for every product. And then developers also, people in generally don't have an inclination to coordinate. So engineers love to have their own product, which just it doesn't depend on the other. So there was a lot of security features and things like that. There was a list of justifications why we need separate brand and separate app for every service. And why having one app where everything is integrated was a bad idea. But, our mission is to improve people's lives, right? So, counter explanation of it was, we are in the business of making our consumers' lives easier and not our own life. So let's forget about the challenges. We'll solve them. We have an incredible team. We're going to get it done. For the consumer, can you guys justify why consumer needs to download every app? It's not convenient. Yeah, everybody agreed. Why we need to have different brands for different products? Consumers will be confused. There will be no identity for the company. The companies like Apple have a single brand, and people, expect Apple to produce a car. That's the brand we're going after. We're not going after brand which is dissected into different kind of brands and confusing the consumers, and it will be expensive to maintain. So from a consumer perspective, it made total sense. And I think we were just brave enough to make that decision when nobody else was doing that. And from today's perspective, that was probably the most important decision we have taken. Super app, which integrates everything in a one single mobile application.
Can you take us through the process of when you propose a new product internally? There's something that you always include in your internal memo, and it's 10 questions. Maybe take us through that process. How does it get done and eventually see the light of day?
Well, we like to simplify things very much. And from that perspective, first of all, idea can come from anybody, right? So idea can come from the top management, then from me, from consumers, looking at other examples in the world or listening to consumer feedback and things like that. So anybody in the company or any pretty much, endless sources of the ideas. Now, there is a big what is important is to get the idea executed. And that's, I think, where sometimes art, sometimes tech, engineering, comes, sometimes design, sometimes taste. There are many ingredients of successfully executing idea for the consumer. There are a couple of things that we do differently from other companies. Number one is that we actually simplify dramatically. So what that means is, for example, we know the product needs to have 4 features. And some other companies will put these 4 features and then they will launch the product with the 4 features. We actually take a view that we need, out of these 4 features, we need to still pick up the most important one, which consumers will like, and then we can add 1 feature every 3 months. So in 12 months, we still will have a product with the 4 features. But during these 12 months, when we start from a simple product with a 1 feature, our team is growing together with this product and experience. These 4 features might be changed because we suddenly start collecting feedback from consumers. Consumers are getting engaged with feature by feature, so they're always excited to see the company changing and growing, but also, they are not overwhelmed by features. They have this 1 feature which they value. So taking to the drastic simplicity is extremely important approach. And the second one is really the products that we have, they are really incredible, but they actually start with the sort of what we call sort of 3-pager. And this 3-pager, basically the way it's written, the idea of to write the 3 pages in a very simple language. So if we show you 3-page of some of the incredible, we have biometrics products and things like that. If we show you the 3 pages, you read it, you understand it, even if you don't work for in our team. And it basically means, what is the consumer experience now, how the consumer experience will change with consumer words, and it has to include the top 10 questions from a consumer. What is it? Why should I use it? How much it will cost me? Just like simple questions from a consumer. And when you're trying to put yourself, while writing this document, in the shoes of a consumer, there are a lot of eye-opening conclusions, things you can simplify, things you can do differently, because now you are not developing a product for the product, but you are actually have this product idea, but you are trying to put yourself into the shoes of a consumer and looking with the consumer's eyes on that product. And if you visualize it and you're good product development or the product team in general, I think that is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful part of our process. And once you develop this 3-pager, and we might spend a lot of time on these 3 pages back and forth, once we decide, yes, sounds like a great idea, then starts, development process, design process, prototyping, testing on the consumer, scaling it. We test on ourselves, for example, most of the products, because we are the consumers of our own products. We have to love them in the first place. So we test on ourselves, we do some groups reviews with our consumers and so on and so forth. So then the development process actually starts. But this 3 pages and top 10 questions which consumers might ask is important.
Let's talk a bit about Kazakhstan, because Kaspi is the Kazakhstani tech company or just the company, I would say. But Kazakhstan is a place, is a country with about 20 million
Correct.
people, right? Tell us, how has the ecosystem allowed Kaspi to flourish, right? The ingredients. One thing I read not long ago is that, this very famous investor, Tim Draper, famous Silicon Valley investor, has actually been to Kazakhstan, has invested in Kazakhstan, has been there a couple times. He is mesmerized by the progress he's seen. He thinks some of the technology has overtaken parts of the US. But I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, I met him when he was in
Yeah.
Kazakhstan. Yeah, it was cool to hear. Like, he almost said before Kaspi and after Kaspi. So that was pretty cool. In terms of the country, we're really grateful that this is a home of Kaspi. The company was built there. We have been in pretty much most of my professional career I have spent in Kazakhstan, even though I'm Georgian. I have been there since 2006, and that's pretty much for most of our team. We have been developing our team sort of locally. We have corporate university. There are very few people like me that haven't been born and raised in Kazakhstan, so we're sort of truly homegrown company, and the environment there has been supportive for our growth. Right, we have been successfully building legal framework, the access to the talent or ability to acquire the talent to sort of build and develop. I think Kazakhstan is a front runner in terms of the cashless payments. When probably penetration of cashless payments, if you take like 2016, I think 15, the cashless payments were roughly 15% or something of the payments, and now it's vice versa. So now 85 plus% of all the payments is a cashless payments, and it's just such a remarkably short period of time. And we have been building the mobile services and mobile payments, which have been driving this change. Government services, country, I think has achieved incredible progress. If you think from the it obviously comes from the top. President Tokayev always had this focus on innovation and make sure that the citizens, get the services, digital services distributed to them, and this successful partnership of the government entities and the companies like us enabled, right? So, some of the things which are completely, mind-blowing is, over the dinner, for example, you can change ownership of the car from me to you.
Wow.
And to develop that service, and it comes with a digital signature. We had to work with Ministry of Internal Affairs. We had to work with Ministry of Digitalization or Innovation. We had on certain products like paying taxes. We work with the Ministry of Finance. So we work with a wide range of government services, and having this sort of open-minded approach when government has done really good job developing the backend. So the services are there. But actually, when you partner with the companies which are specialized in the front end, which is consumer experience, right, then you can have the millions of people using those services. So citizens of Kazakhstan are extremely grateful. I think they are, now it's a huge source of pride, when your consumers are somewhere in another country, right, and they are saying, things are done in Kazakhstan much better than they are done in other countries, and they're comparing their tourist destinations. It's really rewarding. So I think we're doing our share really of promoting the country and telling about it, because we are front runner of innovation. But I think the Kazakhstan has so much more to say. There are very few. When I'm telling the things which are possible in Kazakhstan, then in terms of cashless payments, e-commerce, and everything, it's people are really surprised. So I guess thank you for the podcast. It's invitation. It's honor for me. This ability to tell about Kazakhstan and is incredibly important, I think, for the country, and for you'll have a lot of listeners in Kazakhstan now.
Great. And then I will visit, and next time we'll record in Kazakhstan.
You are invited, and you can actually see our services. I think you'll be shocked.
That's on the record.
Agreed.
Now, Kazakhstan, at the end of the day, 20 million people is not a small market, but it has a limit. there's a very interesting HBS case study about Kaspi. So now you've gone from student to star of a case study where the main question discussed by students is, where do you go next, right? And in fact, in preparation for this interview, I asked a few of fintech leaders around the world that I know, people like Mickey Malka, what should I ask? What should we discuss? And everyone was telling me, please, let's talk about what's next.
Right.
Where do you go after Kazakhstan? I know that you still have a lot of room to grow locally, but tell us how you're thinking about the next step.
Well, I mean, if you look at the company, Kazakhstan is our home, so we'll be always focused on making sure that we continue innovating and delivering the high quality services to our citizens. Of course, that would be always a priority. But then if you speak to the top management team and the guys, we do have this, we're still hungry to develop the company to the new levels. And we want to be a sort of 100 million user company. Now we have, 20 million live in Kazakhstan, the population of the country, around 15 million use our product. We love every single consumer that we have and the merchant that is providing the services to our consumers through our platforms. But again, I mean, we are just hungry for bigger. We believe there is something that we can export from the country. People think about Kazakhstan as oil country, but we believe that Kaspi can now position Kazakhstan on the map of the innovations we've been successfully doing, but just going to other markets. So we definitely think about other markets. Now, the strategy for us would be quite straightforward. We're going through the process now, actually for almost a year, more time dedicated to it. We're going through, we look at the markets, we see which markets fit the profile in terms of the, things like mobile penetration or cashless transactions, and things like that, e-commerce, obviously. And the idea is that we would like to go in the markets which are bigger than Kazakhstan. Some of the markets we think about are Eastern Europe is attractive. Asian markets are attractive. There is Uzbekistan, which is the big market, which has a border with Kazakhstan, also attractive. So those are kind of markets, our thinking. But, again, we never had access to cheap financing. We're extremely focused just because we never had the luxury of having access to financial and human resources. That's why, that we have almost not grown in number of people for the last 3 years or since the London IPO. So we're always extremely efficient. And from that perspective, we want to make sure that we get the country right and acquisition target right. But we will be looking at the banking, sort of fintech, payments, e-commerce. Those are the areas of our interest. But eventually we will be looking to replicate the super app business model. Our final goal, government services, is something really unique for Kazakhstan. I hope that in other countries, governments will be as open-minded to build something like this, but everything else outside of the government services, thinks about cashless payments and e-commerce and the fintech. Those are the areas we now currently exploring. So working really hard. As I mentioned, once we get something in our head,
oh yeah, I can see that.
We get it done. So
and governments should pay attention, because I even read that tax collections went up in Kazakhstan after
multiple times
you launched in-app tax payments.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
it's the learning there is, if you simplify the life and if you calculate the taxes and you show the amounts to people, and there is just the one button to push, people want to be, operate in accordance with the law. But like actually going somewhere and actually speaking to the tax authorities in other countries, people are a bit afraid, if you know what I mean. So, but if there is a convenient online services and everything is calculated and done, people use it. And the same pretty much for every service we've launched on the government services section of our app.
On the point that you mentioned about not growing headcount in the last 3 years, but certainly growing revenues and market cap,
right?
Has AI been a factor in this? especially for, I think, your AI bot,
Yeah.
Flan.
Yeah, we call him Ruslan. It's a popular name in Kazakhstan. So we have developed the virtual assistant, and I think it's really the world-class level of customer service. He's doing job probably for almost 2,000 people now. So he is basically responding pretty much all sort of the consumer facing activities are overtaken by Ruslan, and that really allows sort of our teams to focus on things which matter more for a consumer. And Ruslan, because it's AI, he needs to be raised and educated and learn himself and trained, of course. So we're going through the process of training him constantly, and he's basically taking the one sort of service after another, and pretty much I would say our goal that pretty much all the customer facing activities eventually will be managed by AI. And our people in our teams will be focused on actually managing and training the AI, or rather than being part of the process. So yeah, so that clearly doing job basically for 2,000 people. That was one of the major reasons why we didn't grow.
You have, you're clearly a very driven person. I think it's evident to anyone listening that since you've been probably a young kid, you set your mind and your sights into something, you go and get it. But what's driving all of that ambition, all of that motivation? Like what drives you? Does it tie back to your childhood, maybe not having much to eat at home, or is there something else?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, in general, there was, when I was applying to HBS, the letter of reference was done by this first Georgian I mentioned who graduated, right? And he showed me afterwards the letter of reference, and there were like 3 questions or whatever. I think he wrote only one thing: he's a doer. So I'm just getting things done, and what I really enjoy is, just, having not being limited by any sort of borders and the rules. I think being open-minded. I'm really just excited about, feeling the mission of being proud, I think it's incredible feeling when you walk the street and, for our team, this feeling of when you walk the street and people just tell you thank you for the services you have developed. And when I was at HBS, my friends remember that I said one of my goals in my life is to develop the company which I will be proud of. We had this speech training session, and I basically said that, and as far as the business, what I want to make sure is when I walk the street, people will tell me thank you for the products which I've developed and the company which I've built. But the street is 2 ways. So if there is somebody on the other side of the street and he looks at me, he will tell to the 3rd person, this is the guy who has done this. And that's what has been driving. I think I just like to improve people's lives, and we're just honored to be in Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan gave us all the chances to build Kaspi. Kaspi could be anywhere, but it is in Kazakhstan for the reason is because the team has been assembled there and the environment is right, and we're grateful for our users, consumers, and the country that they gave us the chance to do that.
You've said that the team, although it's in Kazakhstan, could compete in any market in the world.
Correct.
In the US, in China, Brazil. On that point, do you pay close attention to all the innovations that are happening in other markets, not just in the US, but Africa, Latin America,
Yeah,
Europe?
Exactly. I mean, we're engaged with the guys, other companies across the world. The Meli is a great company, new, we basically just, we're visiting multiple countries during the year. We like to learn a lot. Actually, just about a couple of weeks ago, 3 guys graduated from Harvard Executive Program. So I think we have total now 7 or 8 guys, and we'll be sending 2, 3 guys every year into executive management at HBS. It just builds the framework. It's nice to take your mind off the job and just to learn. And I think this our desire to learn, to change, to adapt, this I think has been a driver of development and the growth in our company. So yeah, definitely, we're definitely learning like crazy always.
So it ties back to you growing up where education was paramount, was the most important thing. You kind of try to bring that into the company and into the country.
Correct. The best investment you can do, especially early in your life, is education.
Could not agree more with that. Before I let you go, Mihail, are there any sports that you love?
Football.
Football?
Yes.
Yeah.
Football.
How's the Kazakhstani or Central Asian League?
It's good. I mean, I'm really excited about the football. You know, there are a couple of things that I think football can be improved by technology, but AI will never play the game. So that's why I'm excited about football from that perspective. I also excited, I basically actually building the academy for kids. So, and I want to do this in the UK because UK is like home for the football in Kazakhstan. And I just believe, you know, that I like just to invest into youth and contribute back. I think investing into the kids and investing into their education and growth. And if I can build this with technology, the best academy, football academy maybe in the world, I would say, you know, I think that's, I find this extremely rewarding. So, you know, I not just like football, but yeah, I tend to build technology data-driven academy, which will educate and raise professional footballers.
Yeah. And you used to do some karate, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was fighting a lot when I was young.
You got to do what you got to do. And any books that you love that you like to often recommend or reread?
I think you know, there is nothing unusual if I recommend any book, right? Because there are so many people doing this anyway. So what I would say is maybe I would just share the way I approach reading. I approach reading a bit differently. So I rarely read the books because I'm interested in reading generally. So I will take, you know, there is a goal. So for example, you know, we want to launch the Net Promoter Score. Okay, that's it. So I basically just start focusing and reading the books, articles, HBS cases, you know, internet research. I will be reading about that promoter score. You know, my partner, who is Vyacheslav Kim, he basically understands that he shouldn't be coming to my table. You know, once I'm seen with the books like this, that means he is working on something. So let's just leave him alone. You know. Or, for example, you know, we want to launch e-commerce. So I will be reading about e-commerce. I will be reading about Amazon, you know, One Store. Or I will be reading about Meli, you know, annual report. Or I will be reading about Rakuten, which we visited, HBS Grad, you know, marketplace in Japan. We did before launching, we did a four-day trip to Japan. So, you know, again, you know, now e-grocery. Now there is a cars. We're creating the car marketplace. You know, now I'm reading how to think about the cars, how you actually fix your car, how you buy spare parts. So when there is a goal, I align everything around this goal. I'm just super focused on reading that. You know, I'm not at the stage of my life when I would like to read just the general literature. Yeah. I think I will do this later. But now, you know, I just define the goal and I focus on collecting as much information as possible about that specific subject which I'm interested in. And because it's a business, you know, that basically is driven by the business goals at the moment.
I love it. Everything you do, I mean, tells me you live a very purpose-driven life.
Yeah. And I think that's the definition of happiness in some way.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing this. Thanks for joining me on FinTech Leaders live in the middle of New York in NASDAQ. Congrats on all the success of Kaspi, and this is just the beginning. I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Спасибо.
Thank you.